So for my homesteading project, I'm going to be turning this old bench that was in the basement of our home when we purchased it. Um, and we brought it outside a while ago. It's a little weather worn. But I want to revamp it and use it as a potting table and give it new life. Okay, so I started by removing this real thin piece of plywood that was that bottom shelf. It was all rotted out and only about 1/4 of an inch. And then I went and measured, removing a piece of wood. I measured the inside of, the inside distance between the two and made sure it was the same on each side. And then I went and cut my pieces of 2x4, my new 2x4. This was to 15 3/4. And then here I am just screwing them in to that board. And I used 1.5 inch screws for that. I had to grab a mallet and kind of knock that one into place because it was a little tight, but it fit. And then I did 2 stringers in between so that I could put some more weight on that piece. Put some more weight on the lower shelf because I plan to put all my pots and things like that, my soil buckets there. So yeah, that's just me setting it up, getting the first section done. Then I moved to the back. I had to move the bench out away from the shed, and I just moved to the back and did the same thing, attached the stringers. And then here I am, I'm just removing some old screws that were from that piece of rotted plywood. Just removing some of the screws. Some of them even just kind of broke off in my hand. So here I am measuring out for the bottom shelf. This is a piece of 1/2 inch plywood. It's actually an old work table that we had in the house, so that's why there's holes in it. That was for electrical cords to be able to go down. It was my old sewing machine table. So here I'm making the notches. I'm measuring out with my quick square. I had measured where the 2x4 legs came down and wrote down in my book 4 inches by 4.5, and so that's what I cut with the circular saw. But I was actually wrong. It should have been 4 inches by 2.5 should have been what I cut. But because of the stringers, it worked out okay. Whoops, there goes my drill. So I'm just making sure I'm not cutting through the 2x4s that are holding up my wood. Also, I realized after I was done cutting that the strings of my sweatshirt jacket were dangling, which is a huge safety no-no, and I would yell at my students if they were doing that. But I did fix it when I had to go and cut other stuff and tucked them in. But yeah, here I am just cutting out those notches. So here's the piece of plywood in place, and I'm just going to go around and screw it in. I decided to screw it into the stringer pieces. I didn't want to screw it into the 1 inch 1x4. I just wanted to have a better, more solid grip. You can also see in the video here where my measuring mistake was, but fortunately because of those stringers that I put in, it didn't really make too much of a difference. I would have liked to have been neater. And that one I completely missed the stringer. So I'm going to walk you through. This is my completed awning. Sorry for my very messy shed. My husband's job is crazy. So what I did here was I have my, maybe this will be easier, my backboard here, which is 85 inches because I measured out on my wall that is going to be attached to kind of where the studs are, plus just the way it'll hang. You'll see when it's all finished. These stringers here are 24 inches and they're just pocket screwed in. Then I have my awning piece, which I cut to a 22.5 angle because I didn't want my awning to be like a really deep pitch. I kind of wanted it a little more flat. So that's what I did there. And then making this angle nuts to figure out. But this bar here is 34 inches. And then I cut this angle. So I initially marked it by lining everything up and doing my trace, doing a line trace to get a rough idea of the angle. Angle ended up being about 75 inches, which I'm very fortunate our compound miter saw is able to do that angle. And then I just screwed it in here. And then this is 12 inches up from the base, so halfway. So that keeps it stable. And then I did a cross stringer here at 78 inches. Yeah, so hopefully I don't have to add an additional. I was originally going to do an additional, but I feel like since I now did it out of 2x4, my original plan was to do it out of metal, but I didn't have enough metal, and for me to get to the metal shop is about an hour-and-a-half journey to get there, and just with time and life, just didn't really work out. So I did end up having to purchase 2x4s for this project, but that was actually substantially cheaper than buying the 1-inch steel tubing. So this will be, maybe down the line I will change it, but for right now, this will be it. So next I'll show you how it's going to get installed. I'm going to start sewing my awning piece from the fabric that I found on super clearance at the end of the season. So to just, rather than doing all the math and then, being concerned that I didn't do it right, I am just physically tracing the end of my awning piece onto some wrapping paper. And then from there I can add my seam allowances and cut and use that as my pattern. So here's that pattern piece that I just traced. So now here I am adding my seam allowance in. I added from the bottom, that cross stringer, I added 5 inches. So, because I wanted a 5-inch hang. So I'm just marking that with my ruler and drawing a line. And I went and grabbed a darker pencil so I could see the line a little better. And that's me just thinking about it. And then I went and grabbed my quick ruler I don't know why I didn't have it in the first place, but I grabbed my quick ruler so that I could do a quick, easy seam allowance. For that bottom, the 5-inch hang, I added 1 inch, so that way I can do a 1/2-inch hem on the bottom. And then for my lines that I drew for the angle, I'm just doing a 1/2-inch seam allowance. In hindsight, I probably should have put a 1-inch hem after seeing it hanging on the awning, but I think the half inch will be all right. I also have that little notch from the 2x4 at the top, added a 1/2 inch to that. And then I'm kind of laying out my idea, and I decided to add 2 inches to that back half, so that way I can I can roll that 2 inches over onto the 2x4 and staple that on so it's nice and taut for the awning and won't blow up in the wind. And this is my studio space, but the way I had to set up my camera kind of makes me look really crunched. But then I laid my pattern piece that I made, I cut it out, and then I laid it onto the fabric. The reason I flipped it over to cut is so that I was cutting the angle, the bulk of the material from the raw edge, from the salvage edge, so that way I can still use that center piece. So I have it all cut out here. I just use weights. The fabric was a little thick to pin, and it was causing some bumps, so I just ended up using some heavy stuff that I have in my studio. And I used the manufacturer salvage edge as my straight edge, but I want to cut it off. I don't want to sew that because I don't want to risk it showing. So I just remove my pattern piece, and then I cut the salvage off. Yeah. And now it's ready to go. Okay, so once I finished cutting out the pieces, I also cut out a long rectangle, the full width of the fabric, which was 52 inches, and then by 85, which was the length of my stringer for my awning. And here I am just sewing the side panels to that large rectangle. I clipped the corner here so that it would lay a little bit smoother. And I'm sewing everything with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just because it's easier than doing the 5/8. Not that it's really easier, but yeah, and I'm just working my way down. I don't really pin. Now this cut fabric is on the bias, so I do have to be careful about how I sew, and I just make sure not to pull anything too tight or you end up with ripples, because the bias likes to stretch more than the rectangle, which is on grain. So I just sew down, and I just kind of match it up as I go. And then I just repeated that on the other side. Now I am putting a 1/2 inch rolled hem around the whole thing, and I just work my way around. And again, I don't pin really much anymore these days. I've been sewing for a very long time. I just kind of, as I go, kind of just roll with my fingers. So I am finally finished. It got dark crazy early today. It is only about 4:45, and it is pitch black. It's also raining, but I finished. So I just want to show you, here's the awning piece, all installed against the shed. And if I can back up and you don't mind the raindrops, there is the sewn awning installed. And nice raindrops. And then I'm going to go back under the awning so I don't get all wet. So I installed the pegboard here I decided kind of at the last minute that I wanted to do, I had kind of this, this was a piece of flooring. As you can see, it's got the lip. This was a piece of leftover flooring. So I decided to make it like a little shelf so it can hold like my root, my root stuff and my different, you know, foods for my plants and things like that. And then I can also hang items from here. The bench is all finished. I just reinforced some of the wood underneath, and then I added the bottom stringer. But it is all finished. I am very happy with it. There's a couple little things I may change in the future, but for now it is just perfect. Now I can load it up with all my crazy pots that have been sitting out, but not right now because I'm getting poured on. So yeah, there's my project.